Welcome to Planting Pinellas, the podcast that digs deep into the heart of gardening in Pinellas County. Presented by Master Gardener volunteers of the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. I'm Charlotte Vaughn.
I'm Alan Shapiro. Whether you're a local looking to connect with your community or a visitor curious about your area's culture, conservation, and all things green, this is the place for you.
Join us as we explore the people, places, projects, and of course plants that make Pinellas a thriving hub of sustainability, innovation, and natural beauty. From gardening tips to environmental initiatives, we've got the roots of Pinellas covered. So grab your gardening gloves and let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Planting Pinellas. We are very excited to have you for our May episode, and this one is going to be jam-packed, Charlotte. Let me ask you a question. What if you could cut your watering bill in half, build richer soil, and create a garden that practically takes care of itself, even during Florida's dry spells or even when we have heavy rains?
That sounds awesome.
That's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to go through a lot of stuff, a lot of segments and a lot of different things, because we're going to be talking about building richer soil. We're going to be talking about how to irrigate in a way that is going to be efficient and effective. We're going to talk about our fertilizer ban that's coming up because June is around the corner.
And the watering restrictions that we're still monitoring because of the drought conditions until we really get into some good rain.
Yeah, so it's a big episode. And some of this stuff that we're going to talk about, we've talked about in our previous episodes. So we always encourage our listeners to go back, go find our episodes on fertilizer, on mulch, and we'll get into those much deeper.
And just kind of touching on it here as an overview, but then referencing back to those previous deep dives that we've done where you can really get a lot more information from those isolated episodes. But this is just going to be kind of a broad spectrum overview that as we're coming into our summertime season, that some people in Pinellas actually take summer off from growing. Either they're part-time residents of our county and they are not around during the hurricane season. Some people try to avoid the hurricane season.
I can't imagine that.
Oh, yeah. I can't blame them in some ways. Then others that are here for the long haul, even if we're not growing something right now because the weather is a little bit more harsh in our summertime, how can we prepare? How can we get ready to make that really go time growing season as it starts to cool off later in the summer more effective and more productive? And anything that we can do across the summertime, because you don't want weeds to take over. You don't want your garden to decline.
No.
You want it to at least status quo maintain, but preferably that you could be building up towards a more productive and more enjoyable, cooler season.
And you make a really good point about that. And I think that's what we've tried to talk about and over the time on these episodes is maintenance, making sure that you're watching what's going on, especially with insects. And what that does, as we talked about, is making it so that your garden or your flower beds take care of themselves in some ways. So you're not going to be doing so much work and that it's going to be a burden to you. This should be fun. This should be enjoyable.
And if we can reduce maintenance, then we're reducing cost, we're reducing effort. We're honestly making our garden more enjoyable, but also more sustainable. We're thinking long term.
Also, I just wanted to point out, also making our environment, our ecosystems
absolutely
more sustainable. So it's a benefit.
Because it's bigger than one single garden. It's everybody all working together to have the culture of growing things in a sustainable and eco-friendly way. Talking about capturing water, talking about retaining the moisture that we have.
This is our first segment. So we're going to talk about capturing water.
And then building the soil. So how do we capture and store the water? And one of the things that I have been kind of obsessed with is the idea of rain gardens and bioswales. And these are sort of parallel ideas, but in looking at the difference, really the rain gardens are a little bit more self-contained and the bioswales tend to be more linear. So in effect, they're the same thing, just in different shapes. But let's talk about what they actually are.
In researching this, I was seeing this more from a county perspective.
Right.
I think individuals, we can use bioswales,
Sure.
but from a county perspective, it's a much more efficient way of capturing the water before it gets down into the drains.
And if you think about a larger parking lot or other impervious surfaces, including roads, that you have runoff from those impervious surfaces, that it's going to go somewhere. So if you can create a environment that absorbs it, but also filters it, that the more plant matter you can put into those bioswales or rain gardens, you can really help to trap the contaminants like engine oil or even metals and fertilizers and other things that water is sticky. And we talked about this last season, but as it washes across these impervious surfaces or even across things like turf grass, that if it runs into a natural area, that contamination is going to get picked up in the natural area. And if it flows directly into a natural body of water, then that's just going to spread to all of the bodies of water around. It can feed algae. It can do a lot of harm. So anywhere that you can help to keep the water where it is for a while, but allow it to naturally percolate and filter down instead of across, it's going to help create that filtration. That you might want to put some rocks around to help with erosion. You might want to build a bit of a bank on one side or on all sides and plant plants that can handle standing in hot, dry conditions or in temporary standing water. And you really don't want a rain garden or a bioswale to hold water more than about 24 hours.
Right.
Because if it doesn't fully drain within that amount of time after a rain event, like we have those, heavy rainfalls that we're hoping to get
Soon.
in moderation soon,
Yes.
that we will have the issue of mosquitoes potentially breeding in that water, and nobody wants that. So all of these things, and there's so many resources. The county does classes frequently on rain barrels, which is my next point, but also sometimes they do classes on rain gardens as well.
Well, the county actually has a really good, and this is, we'll put it in our notes, really good PDF on green infrastructure. It's really, really well done. And it says green infrastructure describes the practice, and this is what exactly you said, that create a habitat and allow rainwater to filter through vegetation, soil, rather than running into the storm drains. So as I said, that sounds like more like a county thing that they would do to try to prevent that. But I think individuals can do that too.
Absolutely.
I mean, absolutely. If you have an area that is kind of bare of soil, just by putting in some native plants or some plants that are going to be able to handle the extra water or even the dry times, that's going to stop a lot of the water running off.
Yeah, I live in a neighborhood where we have sidewalks. So we've got that little strip of grass in between the paved road and the paved sidewalk and then the homeowner lots. So I have some neighbors that are very Florida friendly in their landscaping, and I love it. And a couple of them have actually created a sort of a bioswale in that strip of land where the water that runs from the street towards their yard and then from their yard and the sidewalk again towards the street and the storm drains has a place that it's a little bit lower and it's got some kind of vegetation and other things to help stabilize the soil, but also just to allow the water a place to go that it can filter down and go back into our aquifer and go back cleaner because it's gone through that root system, and that you're able to trap the things that would harm the natural water bodies. So in that aspect, or if you just put it in the middle of your yard where your rain gutters can kind of filter into a couple of pools around your home that keep them about 10 feet away from your foundation, but allow, again, a place that water can just stay in your yard, percolate down, and really benefit the whole ecosystem around you in many ways.
And I think this is what helps with individuals can do.
But you're setting an example.
But you're setting an example.
When they see how it works and how easy it is.
Right. And then it is, because once you have the plants established, it really is a big benefit. I mean, I wish HOAs would hear this more often and get involved in that.
I think some of them are. And that's what gives me hope is that, I've worked in that industry over the years, and there really are people that want to be impactful in good ways. And so I'm not an enemy of HOAs, but I don't live in one for a reason. So, you
No,
know,
I'm not an
kind
enemy of HOAs either. I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yeah. So I think that there's such an opportunity that, especially as an HOA board can review plans and things, and allowing and embracing more eco-friendly landscaping is totally within their grasp. And so I really want to inspire them of how beautiful Florida-friendly gardening can be.
It's education, and that's what I really think it is all about. It's being observant and getting some education, and I think most HOA people would realize that there's the big benefit because it's cost. The cost is going to be much less in terms of any kind of fertilizer that's necessary, in terms of having to replant anything, in terms of landscaping. You can reduce the cost of landscaping. So if you take it from a monetary perspective, I think that's where a lot of HOAs would come in and say, oh, okay, maybe we should look at this.
For sure. And even the cost, yes, it hits your wallet, but there's also a cost to our ecosystem and a cost to our environment long term that we want to be sustainable in that as well. So all of those things are great. And when the rain does come, we want to hang on to it. We want to be able to use it efficiently and effectively. Again, rain barrels are amazing. I'm in the process of installing another one on my property. And honestly, I haven't run out of water yet. I'm still watering from my rain barrels because I've been able to catch so much, and they refill so quickly. Once we do have a rain event, I got several inches just from a little drizzle earlier this season. And once we really get a good soaking rain, then they're going to be back full again. Now, I don't use that on my edible gardening because there is a risk to that where there could be some contaminants in that. There could be some contaminants in that could impact your vegetables and things. You don't want to be eating those. You want to give it some time to filter out. So if you're not using that bioswale and rain garden system, that you're just catching it straight off of the roof, then that's great for your ornamentals. And then you can be more judicious about where you're using fresh water and really preserving that for the things that you are planning to eat in your garden. For those of us that grow things that we want to eat, not everybody does.
True.
So, and that's fine. The rain barrels are pretty simple to install, and there's a variety of them. Some of them require very little setup where you can just have a mesh screen that maybe is a little bit concave so that the water can just catch directly in that one spot. Or you could put, if you think about it like an upside down umbrella or tent where it captures more space and directs it down into that barrel, or even if you use a gutter.
Okay.
There are diverters that you can purchase online. I've seen them locally on occasion, but I couldn't tell you where at the moment. I usually just buy online.
And then you need a mosquito netting across.
Absolutely. You
top,
definitely want to make sure.
Especially here in Florida.
Yeah. That you've got some kind of a screen or a net. And some people will also add a natural BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, that it helps to prevent the larvae from developing. So once that's in that contained system, it's not going to harm your ornamentals. In fact, some ornamentals, it's recommended to spray it directly on the plants. So having it in the water isn't going to hurt those ornamental plants. It's fine. And then an interesting thing that you can do with your rain barrels and with even your freshwater watering is actually an ancient thing. And this is a really interesting Mesoamerican cultural practice that has come into a popularity recently, and it's something called Oya. The Oya is a porous clay pot, and some of them are purpose-built.
Until we did this episode, I had no idea what this was, to be quite honest.
I only discovered them a few years ago, but
and then when I was looking at this, I went, wow,
it makes so much sense.
This is really cool. And I think it was really geared for more the desert environments, like Arizona. Like I found an article from from the Cooperative Extension in Arizona. So it seems to be, which makes sense from there. So tell us, it is really a fascinating thing.
So you can use them in the ground or you can use them in container planting. And the idea is just that you bury this clay vessel. And I have some that it almost looks like a soda bottle shape, that it's a 1 or 2 liter kind of bottle that is just a cylinder. with a rounded base and then a narrow neck. And there's a little,
And that neck is planted above the soil
well, at the soil level.
or at the soil level, right?
Right.
But you have access to it.
Yes, and you want to cover it. So the ones
Right.
that have the really narrow openings, you can use a cork or even just a rubber stopper of some kind, that just something that is safe and can last outdoors, but it'll keep the mosquitoes out of it. And then you refill that container and the water slowly seeps through the clay walls of the container underground. And it waters a fairly small area, maybe up to about 15 inches. But the plant roots, if
That's
you plant
what's
your
really
plants
cool.
right around it,
Yeah.
the plant roots will find the water. They will grow to where the water is. So if you've got that OYA system in place, when you plant a new plant there or even a seed, that once it starts to establish its roots, it's going to find that water source. And so
cool.
it'll actually surround that OYA and it'll be getting exactly how much water it needs. And this is the evapotranspiration and all this cool sciencey stuff that we could get into, but it's just pulling out gradually as it needs it. So it's not really going to get oversaturated.
The other benefit of that too is that you're deep with the roots, because one of
Right.
the big issues with hand watering or watering at the surface is how much water is percolating down to the roots that are deep into the soil, which is really you want to get them established.
If you're not watering or providing water deep enough, the roots
Right.
actually won't. And then,
That's where they want to grab where the water is. Yeah.
then when there isn't any water, they're going to get burned and dried out a lot faster at the surface. So you really want to encourage that deep watering. And another thing, if you're not using an OYA, and you can buy one that's purpose-built, you can actually make your own. If you're into pottery, that's great, but you can buy some terracotta pots and just seal two of them together and plug the bottom hole and leave the top one open, or even just a single pot. If you just bury one single pot and then use one of the drip trays that fits it as the lid,
Yeah.
make sure that it stays kind of close and in contact so that, again, mosquitoes can get through a very small amount of space. So you want to block them out as much as possible. You could use a mesh over that as well, some kind of a fabric under that pot layer, but just anything that helps to keep them out, but allow that water to be underground, then the plant roots can get to it. Now, the next best thing, or another parallel thing, would be the micro irrigation or
drip
drip irrigation. And there's a lot of different forms of that. And the IFAS extension here in Pinellas County has multiple classes throughout the year where we talk about not only rain barrels.
I was going to say there's
or
classes for rain barrels. There's classes for
rain garden, just gardening in general. And then specifically, we have classes about micro irrigation several times a year. I've actually taught that class on occasion, and it's just a great resource, and you get some hands-on experience with setting up the system, because it really is a very easy DIY system once you learn the little bit of a learning curve.
I was going to ask you about that because, I think this is where some people take a step back and go, wait a minute, this is very complicated. This is very expensive. I'm not sure I want to do any of this. But as long as you get that education, as you just said, there's a learning curve with everything.
Absolutely.
As in gardening, there's a curve, as we've discovered, where we make all kinds of mistakes. That happens.
I think that gardeners tend to be lifelong learners anyway.
Yes, I would hope so.
Yeah, and especially if you're listening to a podcast about it, then you want to learn. So, get in there. But it's user-friendly, but it's also something that you can get a professional to help you with. And when I was first converting my traditional irrigation system, I converted several zones. And that's another topic that we got into more in the irrigation episode and the watering episode last year. But if you want to convert a zone, do the whole zone as one type. So you can't have a lawn sprinkler mixed with a micro irrigation system. The pressure is going to be off. It's not going to work well.
Right.
So you can get help to set it up. You can get people that will maintain it long term, but you don't necessarily have to. And sometimes it's nice. And I've talked about my experience before where I had an irrigation company that is a local company that was willing to kind of back me up if I made a mistake, that I had a bid on a job that was going to be out of my budget for that moment. And the guy just told me, I think you could probably do this yourself, but if it fails, all you do is turn off your timer because it's not going to leak with the pump not running. We'll get you on the schedule right away and come out and clean it up if you mess up. And thankfully, I didn't mess up, but just that little boost of confidence to know that somebody could have come and helped me if I'd have needed it. So I would say don't be intimidated by the system. There's a little bit of an investment up front, but I would say that the long-term cost recovery,
And that's the point.
the efficiency,
Right,
and
right,
just
right.
the effectiveness of it, that it works so much better than hand watering is a lot of work. And you have some evaporation. The water hoses, the other sprinkler systems, you
Right.
tend to have evaporation. The water's not getting deep to the roots where you need it.
And this is getting right to where it needs to be.
Exactly. You put just a little dripper head or a micro sprayer or something right where your plant needs it. And then you can adjust how much the flow is based on the type of head that you have. There's some that are actually adjustable heads. I will have to apologize for my voice. I've been fighting some seasonal allergies here. So sorry about that.
So the next segment is really about soil building and mulching. So we have good water, we have watering efficiently, but now we need to think about our soil. So I remember one of our episodes, you said, Alan, what is the number one thing that everybody should do? It's like it's the magic bullet.
Getting a soil test.
Getting a soil test.
Absolutely.
So even before you start thinking about composting, even before you think about mulching, you need to get a soil test.
Yeah, and just depending on what you want to plant, that you want to make sure that it's well suited for the placement in your garden. Right plant, right place. We can't get away from it. It's just
Never get away from that
foundational.
principle.
Foundational, because you're setting yourself up for success if you put the right things in the right places where their needs are going to be met and you don't have to intervene as much, and growing things that are suited for our climate, for our environment, for our heat and humidity, and then all the things that making sure that we're getting plants that actually are good for our ecosystem and avoiding the invasives, avoiding the problematic plants, and just making the right choices. But
Green Thumb Festival was this last weekend, and it's a wonderful festival. But one of the things, since I became a master gardener volunteer, my brain and my thought process is very different. I see these people buying all these plants, and I think it's wonderful, and I think it's great that everybody's doing that. But my first thought is, did they get their soil tested? Is it the right plant for the right place?
yeah, did they actually do some research
Did they
first?
do some research first? Yeah.
And when we were there last month, I put out a little recommendation of downloading that Florida Friendly Plant Guide app so that you could check on site and look up, is this plant actually well suited to our environment? Because a lot of these vendors are local, but maybe some of them are buying from growers that aren't directly in our area. So there could be plants that maybe are zoned for 7 or 8, borderline 9, but we're 10 and borderline 11. And that really is a hard line when it comes to gardening, that so many things. And I get frustrated when I'm shopping. It's like zone 8, zone 7.
I know. And they're so pretty and so beautiful.
They're gorgeous. They
They're
just
gorgeous.
can't take the
They're
heat.
just not going to take the heat. I mean, they may survive a little bit in through our winter time, but as soon as our summer heat comes,
Yeah, unless
they're
you
toasted.
are doing a lot of heavy maintenance and you're fighting the disease pressure and you're fighting the stress, like you have to baby it too much that, okay, maybe it's worth it for some things, but for your whole garden to be like that, that's a lot of extra effort and a lot of extra cost that you're going to put yourself into. So something that you can do with any kind of a plant is proper mulching. And there's so many kinds of mulch, because mulch is just something that covers the ground. So it can be just shredded up tree branches when an arborist is removing vegetation. It can be actually living plants. So we can have not only green mulch, but live mulch.
mulch. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. And again, listen to our episode on mulch. It really we go very, very deep into it. But the living mulch is one of the things that I find fascinating. Essentially, once you get those plants established, they're becoming the ground cover.
Right.
And then you can have some smaller plants in different levels. And that's what becomes your mulch in a sense, because it's protecting the soil. It's reducing the evaporation from any water that's coming in. In terms of when we get our large rains, it then also stabilizes the soil. So it's a really a neat feature. And then also you can have some beautiful plants if you do it right.
Right. And
beautiful flowers.
Another interesting concept in that is what I would term as a mulch in place, where if you do trim or deadhead certain plants, that if you just drop the trimmings in behind the plants, that it's a version of what we call the chop and drop, where it adds some organic matter back into that space. But there's an extended version of that where, let's say that you do have a vegetable patch that you're planning to put some things in once the weather is a little bit more accommodating. If you will plant a cover crop of a sort, and that could be something like clover or even the sun hemp or other kinds of plants that will tolerate and grow, and especially the ones that will trap the nitrogen and replenish the nutrients in the soil, that then when it comes time for your growing season to gear up again, that you can mow it down, or you can use a trimmer, or you can hand cut it and just lay it down on top of the soil. And all of that organic matter will then work back into the soil and become a compost of a sort right there in place.
A different kind of compost that's possible.
You can use vermicompost.
Vermicompost.
Which is gardening with worms. And that can be, again, in place, that there are basket systems where you can bury a bucket or a basket that has holes around the side and drop your clippings and things down into that. And the worms that are already naturally in your soil will kind of come and go and carry those nutrients into the surrounding soil.
It adds some aeration because the worms are adding
as they're tunneling
through, so that adds some air, which is important for the roots.
You can do an enclosed system, and some of these systems, because we have such high heats over the summer, the little plastic vermi-hut systems, they actually recommend keeping them indoors. And yes, bringing worms into your house on purpose and putting your food scraps into this bin.
Well,
but it's closed up, but not everybody wants to think about that. So at least
gotta think
keeping
about your
it
partner
in the shade. Yeah, somehow.
what tolerance does your partner,
Right.
You know, that's always something you have to think about.
So you just want to make sure that either the worms have a place where they can burrow down into the cooler soil when it gets too hot, but you're running the risk that they might not come back up after the fact. They might just make a little happy home down there. So again, maintenance long-term, or you could use it seasonally and you could just replenish the worms with the new season as our weather cools off. So it's a great source of very sustainable, eco-friendly compost and nutrients. And some people will also use that rather than taking the whole handfuls of compost. They'll put it into a bag and put that bag down into a bucket of water. And again, you want to keep some airflow in there. So get a little garden pump or something that you can submerge down into that water to keep some air flowing into it and make what we call a compost tea. And this is something that you can use to water your plants in place of a water-soluble fertilizer, where when we get into the fertilizer bans that are coming up very soon, that we don't have to limit those organic things. And we're also keeping those organic things out of the landfill. The more that we can handle things ourselves on our own property and not just ship it off, that it really creates a more sustainable
and that's a
longevity.
DIY fertilizer kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of those things.
Let's talk about the bans, but that's coming up June 1st through September 30th. The fertilizer-free ban. It is an ordinance from the county, and all the municipalities in our area basically follow the county. And we have a fertilizer-free zone that you're not allowed to, you shouldn't fertilize 10 feet from any water source or any slope. That's year round.
Right.
That should be year round.
And just to clarify, this is what we would call the NPK fertilizers.
Sure. Sorry. Yeah.
So there are some zero fertilizers that we talked about this in last May's episode, actually.
Yeah, we did.
Because we were leading into the restrictions.
Yeah.
So the NPK is the one that is restricted. There are some shops that will just completely strip the shelves of all fertilizers, but things for house plants, things for vegetables, and things that have the 000 label, you're thinking, well, what am I getting? Well, those are the macronutrients that they've zeroed out, but they've still got the micronutrients.
Which are some important for some plants.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, all plants benefit from micronutrients as well as macronutrients, just like we as humans do. So it's just a matter of which ones are we really putting as a supplement into the soil. And it's just to reduce that runoff and reduce that impact to our waterfront and all of those things that we've gone into much more depth in the past.
I'm not going to get into the details and the research that's been done on that, but listen to our previous episode. We get into that and talk about why this was done and why it's important. And also just to keep in mind, if any listeners are outside of Pinellas County, there's different ordinances in Hillsborough, because you may walk into a store in Tampa and they have fertilizer. How can they have fertilizer? Well, again, you have to really look at what each of the municipalities' bans are.
There are people that will travel to these other counties to go and buy what they want. Well, you're not supposed to be using it because it's impactful to our environment in this time of the year when we have our rainy season. That is the reason that these bans are in effect, is to try to limit the runoff. So just saying that it's an inconvenience that I have to drive farther, no, it's actually damaging the ecosystem. And this gets me back to the watering, because the phase 3 water shortage order from Pinellas County, until we get some more substantial.
I think it's going to July 1st at this point.
So really conserving and they're not playing around. They will slap on. It's right now $193 citation for the first violation, and then it doubles for each additional violation.
You know, what still bugs me is coming into my community last week, and
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
This was about 8:30, which I think the problem is some people don't realize
the times changed.
But don't even realize how to change their times on their irrigation system, which is
simple solution for that. Just turn it off.
That is a much better solution, and it just drives me crazy. And I wish people would just be more conscious of that. I mean, yes, we're surrounded by water here, but it's not as potable.
It's still a limited resource.
And it's a limited resource. And I think people outside of Florida don't realize sometimes how important our water is.
Well, and less than 1% of all water on Earth is accessible potable water. So yes, we're surrounded by the Gulf and we've got the beautiful Tampa Bay, but we still need to conserve water, because if you look at the Project 2070 and all of those kind of things that we've referred to in the past, that it is a limited resource and we need to be aware. Currently, as of the time of recording, your watering hours are either 8 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. or 12:01 a.m. to 4 a.m. So apparently you can't water at exactly midnight. Cutting it off during those overnight hours, it helps to reduce evaporation. When the sun is not up, it's just going to be a lot more efficient use of your water. If you are trying to keep your lawn green, just the once a week. Currently, make sure that you know your date, that it's either Saturday or Wednesday, depending on your address, north of State Road 580, which is kind of in between Dunedin, Safety Harbor, Clearwater area, and cuts through that sort of area. And then anybody south, it's either Tuesday or Thursday. So Tuesday is the even numbered addresses, and then Thursday is the odd numbered addresses. And then mixed use have different rules. Commercials have different rules.
And one other thing that's important, not to go back to HOAs, but it's my understanding with these restrictions, HOAs cannot fine you if they see your lawn is a little browner.
So I will read this as
you have it up.
Restriction went into effect April 3rd of 2026. No HOA or other entity shall enforce deed restrictions or other community standards requiring an increase in water use, including replacement of plant material to meet aesthetic standards or pressure washing. So all of these things, and you can get exceptions if you have to install sod, but it would be so much better if you could wait until the rain actually starts up again, or especially once things cool off and we're out of these drought conditions. So even restaurants, not just serving water without it being requested, that a lot of that water gets wasted. And turning off your water fountains, if you have an ornamental water fountain, leads to evaporation. And so you're over-consuming water for something that is not strictly necessary to your life. It's pretty, but think about it's not going to be pretty when we run out of clean drinking water. That's a little extreme, I guess, but I think long term. And so there is
the reservoirs are
reality.
lower, from my
Yeah.
understanding. All the reservoirs are not where they should be.
And if you drive over any of our bridges, you can see that a lot of our natural water bodies are low.
Go to the botanical garden, the McKay Creek, the middle of it has mud,
Yeah.
where I've
And
never
then
seen that before.
washing your car at home is also, you can only do that on your lawn watering day, but you have to use a shutoff nozzle and like all the things. Read the restrictions. We've got that.
Yeah.
It's just pinellas.gov/watering-schedule-and-rules. So I'll link that in there. It's already set up to go.
So this gets us basically to our last segment, and I think it's a good segue into long-term ecosystem strategies, things that you can do that we've talked about already. One example of that is native plants. Planting more native plants in an area so that you have this ground cover that is more sustainable. Once they get established, it's sustainable. There's less evaporation of the water. You don't have to water as much because these plants have been adapted to these dry spells that we have. And that's just one area that I think is really, and it helps so much. It helps wildlife support. I mean, if you start planting some of the native plants that are flowering, we have the pollinators now are going to come there. I've planted some mimosa in my front, and it's just, I love it. I sit there and look every day at the bees just coming on. It's really something that's pleasurable.
It's so delightful. I have some flowers that I've maybe been cultivating for a few years, some bulbs and things that one of my amaryllis just bloomed for the first time. And I planted that a couple of years ago, and it had that perfect little 4 bloom cluster that opened all in different sequence. But watching those, and then I planted some native milkweed, and I've already got caterpillars on it. And it's just beautiful to the ecosystem thriving right there in my yard. And I have a lot of the yellow butterflies, like the yellow sulfur.
You make some really good points, and I think that's, you watch it, and it's so enjoyable. It's so wonderful, and there's so many environmental benefits to it. One of the things that was interesting, again, back to when I was at Green Thumb last month, this person came up, and one of the challenges with some of the native plants is, where do I get them? Where's the availability of those? And this one person talked about many flowered beard tongue, something I had never heard of, and I looked it up.
Penstemon is another name for
It's
that.
absolutely magnificent and beautiful. And the issue was, it was really one place that I found it online somewhere in Orlando that you would have to buy it from. Trying to find some of the local plants, that's what I think a lot of people, when we were at the Green Thumb, came up and were asking, well, where do I get these? Where do I find these?
Yeah.
And in some cases, it can be a little bit more challenging.
But I would just start with a nursery that focuses on native plants. And the FNGLA website, which is in the show notes, again, you can find several different nurseries around our area and then surrounding counties, really all throughout the state, that you can go and look for certain plants and find out what they specialize in. That if you're looking for a particular type of plant, that you can figure out who's growing it and then where do they distribute it to, and that maybe even if it does come from a grower in Orlando, that maybe there's somebody in Pasco that sells it, so you don't have to go quite as far.
Right.
But that's a great resource, and that organization is just great for our Florida-friendly gardening in general.
Can I tell you another great resource? It's called the Extension Service.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
So the IFAS Extension Service, and once again, you do not have to come to Largo. There's a email address. There's even a phone number you can call, and you can get help. And that's what all our Master Gardener volunteers, that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. And one last thing that we didn't quite touch on in the long-term ecosystem strategies is kind of tied back to that chop and drop or mulch in place concept, which is brush piles, snags, logs. All of these things actually help to manage and retain water on your property. That you can cut up logs from a tree that you've had to either prune or maybe remove because of damage, and you can keep them as edging in your landscape. And as they're breaking down, they're actually attracting beneficial insects and they're nourishing your soil right there in place. I saw a fascinating thing online just recently where somebody had planted climbing roses in the dead branch clusters of some, small ornamental trees that had died, but they left the snag in place. And it was maybe 8 feet tall or less, but they had these roses and things. And I would picture something like bougainvillea being very good in our climate,
Yeah.
that it could crawl and climb up that natural structure, that you didn't have to do anything for that. You just removed the tops or whatever fell off on its own, that you just left it as it was. And that the way that that benefits that ecological spot in your garden is phenomenal, because a dead tree standing in the yard, just like we talked about last month, that has so much potential for hosting beneficial insects, and that as it kind of breaks down, it's composting and nourishing the soil, that it's just a beautiful way to make it an ornamental thing in your yard that gives purpose to something, where people driving by don't think, wow, why don't they chop down that dead tree? No, they made that artistic. That's so cool. So it's just, again, being resourceful in your garden, finding ways that you can really make a big difference. So how are we going to do that? What are we going to actually do? And I would say, for one thing, you don't have to do it all. Maybe just pick one of these things.
We talked about a lot of things in this episode.
Absolutely.
And
we're just barely touching any of them. But you don't have to do everything in order to do something. Just pick something that feels achievable for you and start there. Starting small is fine, because it's better than not starting at all. Just pick something that you think, okay, I want to try this.
And there's a lot of help, once again.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of help if you are not sure what you're doing, but just try this one thing.
Including the classes, like we mentioned.
Right,
if you go on Eventbrite and you search the IFAS Pinellas Extension Pinellas County is the way that it's worded on there, that you can find all of these classes posted there, and check back regularly, or better yet, click that follow button that they have on Eventbrite, and you'll automatically be notified when a new class is coming up in your area. And you can really get so much good information, both from our extension staff, the Florida Friendly Landscaping team, and then other master gardeners. It's such a great free resource in most cases, but generally, if there's a cost to any of those classes, it's because you're receiving a resource and you're just covering.
Very minimal cost.
It might be $10 for a great book that you go home with, or that you pay $40 or $50 and you go home with a rain barrel of your own that you can put in your yard. So all of these things are very reasonably priced if there's a charge at all.
So once you do this, the next thing would be to share your results.
Absolutely.
There's many places to do that. Be very proud of what you've done and share your results. There are Facebook groups, there are Instagram. Just share your results, and then make comments on our podcast, please.
And a fun fact, if you search Pinellas County Master Gardeners on Instagram, we are now on Instagram as the Pinellas County Master Gardeners. So you can tag the extension in some of your gardening photos, and we might do a feature on some of these gardens or some of these images that we see, and we would absolutely love to connect. I think that was my favorite part about Green Thumb.
Me too.
Was just physically connecting with the people and the gardeners in our local community and surrounding areas. There were people that said that they came over from Riverview or parts of Hillsborough or Pasco, and that they came all the way just for Green Thumb, and they stopped by and said hello. And I just thought that was amazing.
Then lastly, just do some research. Find your resources and do some research. And we've talked about this, I don't know how many times on our podcast, Charlotte, that just if you do a little bit of research, do that soil testing, do a little research, find right plant, right place, which is the number one principle, so that you can have a sustainable garden that's beautiful, that you don't have to work at time and time and time again.
Yeah, and it just really sets you up for success. And speaking of set, here's our Ready, Set, Grow. And we're going to kind of trim this down going forward, that we really want to focus in on some specifics. So things to do to get your garden ready for success. We talked about the living mulch cover crop kind of concept. That would be a great thing to start at this time of year, or at least once we start to get a little bit of rainfall to sustain those things. Always monitoring for pests. That's something that we can't get away from, because
all the time.
There's always
year-round here.
Scale and thrips and mites and aphids, all the things. And just being aware of that, watching for it, and using the IPM strategies where you take the least impactful approach first and then escalate as necessary. And sometimes that would involve using some kind of a spray or a treatment. Sometimes it's just a matter of brushing it off or washing it away. So
Lubers have been around. They've been
yeah, the lubber grasshoppers.
the lubber grasshoppers have been around, and the babies, and you know, what you do with those, and you just take a bucket with some soap and knock them into them.
If you choose to address them.
That's at least right.
Again, that if you're willing to tolerate them for the season that they're here, that they're an insect, that
they're actually a native species.
It's part of our ecosystem here. So do you choose to tolerate them or not? And that's your decision to make. But then handling them in a way where you're not just blasting a spray that's going to hurt our pollinators and all of our other things and have long-term effects, that just being informed, knowing the best and least impactful approach to start with, and then working through a progression as needed. Something to check this time of year as well in the getting ready and set mindset is things like the gardenias and the Exora. There is some normal yellowing that will happen in the older leaves, but if the new growth is also yellowing, that could indicate that there's a micronutrient deficiency. So I know right now I just put some fertilizer on my gardenias because they were showing a lot of yellowing on the fresh growth.
Okay.
And we can still fertilize now. So I made sure to follow the label instructions and all of that. So
I'll have to look at my Exora when I get home. But I think this also goes to people see the yellowing and immediately think that something's wrong with my plant, and it may not be. So again, in this case, look at the new growth and make sure you can see that, because this is what plants do. They go through a normal
And honestly, after applying that fertilizer, now I've got buds coming out everywhere.
Right.
So it just needed a little bit of replenishment of the soil there.
Plants need some food too.
They do. And if you are maintaining your lawn right now and you're at the point where you're having to mow because maybe you are running your sprinklers and getting some growth instead of letting it go dormant, hint, hint, make sure that you're using the recommended height. Make sure that you're keeping your mower clean, because especially if you have a lawn service that goes to multiple yards, that diseases can easily spread at this time of year. And as we get into the more wet weather, things can start harming your lawn where then you have to intervene more and more. So being aware of good maintenance practices. But then on the growing side of this, not a great time to be planting a lot of things that need heavy water use because we're still in those drought conditions.
Yeah.
Not a great time to be planting things that can't take the heat because we're very quickly raising temperatures right now.
And humidity.
We need things that should have already had some time to get established before that hot season comes in. So we talked about those over the last few months of what you should have been planting then, that now it can start to be strong enough to handle these conditions.
This is something a little different that we're going to kind of focus on an individual plant that we picked.
So what was your plant, Alan?
My plant was the Dusty Miller.
That's a good one.
So the Dusty Miller it's not a native plant, but it is a Florida-friendly plant. And that's what's important here. Again, not all plants that we're going to talk about are native, but that's okay. It's Florida-friendly. What I learned with this one, it's a beautiful silvery, white, and gray plant. And so it adds a little sparkle, even when it's not blooming.
Yeah, it does bloom, but it's not really known for its blooms as much as just for the foliage effect.
The foliage is really pretty, and I think it adds a certain effect to your planting. The thing that I did learn, which is interesting, is that this month is pretty much the last month that you should start planting and try to get it established if you wanted to. So it really is a plant that would thrive more in the more cooler times, and once it's established,
it can handle the heat.
It can handle the heat. That's not a problem because it's from the Mediterranean region.
It's interesting the way that it has kind of a fuzzy texture to it.
That's true too, right?
That helps protect the leaf from some of that heat and the evaporation, because it's creating its own microclimate on every leaf. It's just such a fascinating plant.
Yeah,
and
it's really pretty.
I'm one of those people that I like to touch my plants, and I'll just like pet the little fuzzy leaf on the Dusty Miller because I've got it right by my door. And so they're just a beautiful, just a spark of interest. And I actually did a patriotic container plant.
And that would be a perfect,
where I use that as the white
That'll
because
be the white,
it's that silvery color.
Yeah.
And then I had a blue verbena and a red geranium.
That's
so
perfect.
Got a little festive planter going for the summer.
It's a good one. So which one did you
So
pick?
I pulled up the Chrysandra, and I'm not even going to attempt the full name of that because it's a mile long, but it's a really great plant for butterfly gardens. It's sometimes called the firecracker flower. It reminds me a little bit of a shrimp plant, but not exactly the same. There are some small shrimp plants that are invasive. That's not the kind that we're talking about here. The Chrysandra, it's native to India and Sri Lanka, but it is very Florida friendly.
Okay, so it's another Florida friendly one.
Yeah, and again, it's related to the Mexican petunia and the yellow shrimp plant, but it's not invasive like those are. So even though there's some common background, they're not the same plant at all. So they do grow up to 3 feet tall. They have a really glossy kind of a textured leaf, but what I find fascinating is the flower spikes, where if you're familiar with a shrimp plant, it has these little bunches that grow up on each other. Or if you've seen things like basil, or I'm trying to think, the oregano flowers, the way that they just continue growing out, the indeterminate kind of blooms, that this will keep growing a longer and longer flower spike. And these bright yellow flowers that it has, and actually they can be salmon colored, red, yellow, or even pink. There's a orange variety that's called the Florida Sunset, and another one called Orange Marmalade. Wow. I would love to find that one. It just sounds so cute.
I'm looking at pictures of them. They're really pretty, really beautiful.
And they're asymmetrical, overlapping petals, but it's compact kind of plant, but it just has a beautiful color display that can handle the heat. So this is a good time still to be planting this, even in full sun, that it can take that heat. And it's slow growing. You can grow it as a houseplant if you've got enough light for it, but very easy to care for.
I noticed that it blooms year round too, which is another.
Right. And having well-drained soil, but you really don't want it to totally dry out. So something like micro irrigation would be great. And where I talked about that hard cutoff line of growing zones, this one starts at zone 9. So this is just absolutely in its element right here. It does best in zones 9 through 11 and up to 4 hours of direct sun per day, but can also be
It can handle some shade too.
So it's great for those transitional areas in your yard
I believe
too.
the Dusty Miller can handle some shade also.
It can, yeah. So again, just knowing your garden, we're here trying to give resources, and we just love digging into all of these different concepts that we can look at. And we've got a lot of exciting things coming up. June is Pollinator Month, and in particular Pollinator Week. We have a special guest planned for that. And so just really looking forward to continuing throughout our summer and on into the cooler season when we start really ramping up our gardens again. And check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram. And we will see you next month.
Thanks for tuning into Planting Pinellas. We hope you're feeling inspired to get involved, learn more, and grow alongside this incredible community.
Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you like the show, leave us 5 stars or a review. And don't forget to share with fellow plant lovers. Until next time, keep planting, keep growing, and keep making Pinellas County a place to thrive.
This podcast is brought to you by the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences Extension in Pinellas County, Florida, an equal opportunity institution.